I'm really pleased to welcome you here to the Poetry Center at Passaic County Community College, and this is one of my favorite events of the year. I think of starting the poetry contest, I think in 1979, although officially I make it 1980 because that's when we officially started the Poetry Center, because we got the first grant for the Poetry Center. I think that was 1986 when I decided that Ginsberg had been so supportive of what we were doing here at the Poetry Center that not only that, but that he's so connected to Patterson and that he grew up here, that I wanted to change the name of the contest from the Passaic County Community College Poetry Contest to the Allen Ginsberg Awards. And it's been the Allen Ginsberg Awards ever since. I love the fact that we get entries from all over the country and all over the world, actually. I love the quality of the work that we get and the quality of the work that we end up choosing for these awards. I think you'll see when everyone reads how wonderful and how amazing the work is. I do love poetry. I feel that in many ways it saved my life, and I've dedicated a good portion of my life to trying to share that idea with other people and to give other people that same kind of salvation. I do have to say that we couldn't do any of the programs that we do without the help of the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, without the NEA, without Passaic County Community College, and our amazing president, Dr. Steve Rose, who's been very, very supportive of what we do here. In addition, we have individual members and donors who give us money, who help us to carry on these programs. Many of you are old members of the Poetry Center, and many of you remember Aline Papazian, who was with me for 25 years on my staff, and her husband started an Aline Papazian Poetry Fund to help support the work of the Poetry Center, and I wanted to mention her name. I also want to thank all my wonderful, wonderful staff, Smita Desai, my secretary who sits out there with the books, Sue Balick, who is the manager of cultural affairs, and without whom we couldn't do the kinds of things that we do, and who's been so amazing a partner in this venture, not only for the Poetry Center, but for the Passaic County Cultural and Heritage Council and the Theater and Poetry Project, and the art galleries and the Federici Collection and the Contemporary Art Collection. All of that is really part of what the staff does and what Sue does. Also, Susan Amsterdam, who runs the Theater and Poetry Project, which is really complicated because she has to arrange all these visits to schools, and she has to get the school children to come here for theater programs. Also, Nicholas Rodriguez, who helps run the Passaic County Cultural and Heritage Council. So please give them a round of applause, because basically nothing could be done without them. Now, before I came up here, my secretary said, don't forget to say we've extended the deadline for the Ginsberg Awards for this year to February 15th. So I'm telling you now that if you didn't get your submissions in for this year, please, there's still time. February 15th is the new deadline. All right, today I'm very pleased to start with the first prize winners. And I'm going to start by calling Howard Barrelson up. Howard is from Teaneck, New Jersey, and the title of his poem is Last Night. Thank you, honey. Wait a minute. First of all, I got to balance myself over there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Maria. I wonder if there's poetry in having the flu. Last night, a limb fell from our tree in last night's storm. provide shelter from the heat of day. It lies across the width of the street. Its jagged end spikes the air. It is one of many limbs from a trunk scarred with years of living. It can afford the loss of a limb. I am thankful for this tree. I am thankful for the storm that tore a limb from its body, thankful that it still stands strong. For the creatures that live within it, for those that burrow in our garden and cause havoc, for the returning birds that delight my eyes, I say thank you. For the leaves that fall every autumn, for the labor to rake and feel the ache of years, for the field mice that cause me consternation, for the squirrels that eat our tomatoes, for the rains, for the grass, for the color green, for the act of seeing, I say thank you. For the moments of clear wonder, for the beginning and to the end, I say thank you. At night, I run my fingers along the scar from the top of her hip to just above her knee, the bone opened and scoured, implanted with metal and plastic, a wire to close, to hold in place, a revised limb. I feel the limb under the scar 3 times cut open and stapled, and warm to the touch. It is still healing. I wrap her hair around my fingers to hold her to me so she doesn't disappear. I wrap her hair around my fingers so I won't fall into another's dream. I say thank you and close my eyes.
I think it's important not to fall over your own cane, don't you? Our next first prize winner, we had 2, Howard and Robert A. Rosenblum, and his poem is called Dear Amy, and he's from Bound Brook, New Jersey. And let's welcome Robert Rosenblum.
Dear Amy, sure it bothers me that I haven't written more poems for you than your brother. It's not that I write a ton about him, I can only think of 2, only one of which has been published. True, the lines with him get laughs, since he was the one who sped a lot on our cross-country trip to Phoenix, but I got the ticket. So let me try. First, let me thank you for all those emails we exchanged when you first went to Boston University back in 2002. I still have them tucked away in my computer memory somewhere. They were a lot of fun and helped me pass the time at work. You have no idea. Then there was your wedding in Fargo, Jay's hometown, officiated over by a priest and rabbi, the Reform rabbi, the spiritual leader of the Frozen Chosen, her Midwest congregation, as she called herself. Our family took up one table, Jay's the other 13. The New York-LA connection vastly outnumbered on the Great Plains. It never occurred to me that I'd have to speechify, be the father of the bride who takes the microphone from the DJ and babbles something bittersweet and wistful, a sunrise-sunset moment. I had a few things in mind which I practiced, but I didn't write down. I didn't leave anything out. The call from Jay, which I recognized by his North Dakota area code, how he liked you a lot, how you were a great person, how he wanted to spend a long time with you. I didn't get that he was doing something very traditional, very Midwestern, that he was asking for your hand in marriage, and how I just joked, good, you can keep her. And pretty much just hung up. It took your mother to explain the purpose of his call. And there was the first dance and how we cracked jokes during the dance, because that's what we do, crack jokes. Fargo, the Roger Maris Museum at the main shopping mall, Shields Sporting Goods, a superstore like no other, the wood chipper at the visitor center that we all posed with for the center's Facebook page, the actual prop used in the Coen Brothers movie, defanged for tourism. I like it a lot.
And now our second prize winner is Eileen Van Hook. And Eileen is from Wanacue, New Jersey, and her poem is called Thanksgiving Memory. Where is she? Oh, here. Congratulations, Eileen. Wonderful poem. Thank you.
Thanksgiving Memory. My entire family is gathered at my brother's house for Thanksgiving dinner. My husband stands and makes a toast, wishing we would all be together at this table the following year. He does this knowing he is leaving me and our children over this holiday weekend. He has been sneaking items out of the house over the past weeks. A place setting of the pale blue stoneware we chose together. A napkin holder we bought one summer in Wellfleet. A set of worn sheets we once shared. Among other things, to furnish the apartment, which will serve as a front for where he is really living. His departure is not unexpected. We have been unhappy for some time, and he has found someone else. But our children will be shocked. There have been no outward signs of the slow but steady dissolution of our marriage, just a sad falling away we can't seem to control. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my husband took me to the Walpack Inn to celebrate my birthday. On the way home, he told me he had finally decided to leave and would do so over the 4-day weekend. He had always been a generous gift giver, surprising me with extravagant presents in an attempt to make me happy. He really outdid himself this time.
Ah, the irony. Our third place winner is Philippa Scott, and her poem is called Hoboken, 1990, and she's from West Orange, New Jersey. Let's welcome Philippa Scott. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. Pronounce it correctly. Philippa, okay, well, pretty close. No cigar, though.
Thank you so much.
Hoboken, 1990. What if I were to walk up to you when you take a step break from playing at Maxwell's and ask, would you like to join me for a cup of coffee? You'd say, I don't drink coffee, but I'll have some tea. And we'd talk about music. I'd tell you how much I enjoyed your playing. Was that a Coltrane tune? Even though I only knew 2 Coltrane tunes. I'd watch your smooth hands lift your tea mug, wonder how they'd feel sliding down my back. You'd look straight into me, hopeful that maybe your luck had turned. No more eating angel hair with grated pecorino alone. I'd remember how good it feels to sing in my car while driving up 9W, on that tree-lined stretch up to Bear Mountain, how tears just slide out without knowing why. Remember the dull ache on those weekends when my son is away with his father, when he decides to show up with something bright and loud that draws my brown-eyed boy in, away from the routine of homework and showers he pretends to take. You'd tell me about a voice coach you knew, and my heart would beat fast, thinking about the lyrics I'd write to the soulful melodies you'd play on your Blue Nightbird. And you'd ask me for my phone number because you had to get back to your set, and I'd dig through my handbag for a pen, write my number on a coffee-stained napkin, and wonder if my luck had changed too.
R. Bremner, Uncle Harold and Uncle Raymond from Glen Ridge, New Jersey. That's the name of the poem. Uncle Harold and Uncle Raymond from Glen Ridge, New Jersey. Ron?
Okay. On St. Valentine's Night, February 14th at 7 p.m. at Creativity Caravan in Montclair, we have a special Valentine's Day reading. So it's going to be open and anybody can show up. It's at 28 South Fullerton, right down from the library. Uncle Harold and Uncle Raymond. My Uncle Harold and Uncle Raymond lived together in a small flat in Jersey City. Two happy bachelors. Though Harold was married many years ago to an English girl he met overseas during the war. But the marriage was short-lived because, as Aunt Sue said, she was a bad girl. Uncle Raymond never married. It was said he never had the time, working all day on roofs in suburban towns far away, then driving the truck back to the city. Uncle Harold did not drive, not since his car struck and killed a woman. And even though he lost his driver's license for a year, he never drove again. I don't know how he got back and forth to his job at the Yardley Soap Company. Uncle Raymond did drive, and each Sunday during football season, he drove off alone to see the Giants, his beloved Giants, whether in Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, in the Yale Bowl in Connecticut, or in the Jersey Meadowlands. Anytime there was a family wedding, funeral, or other event, Harold had to ride in Raymond's car, which was not so simple as it seemed. You see, they did not talk to each other for many years. No one knew why. Each would eat, sleep, cook, and clean separately from the other. When relatives telephoned, they would pass the phone without speaking. No messages could be passed from one to the other. We can imagine them at breakfast, frying eggs in separate pans, never speaking. Or did one wait until the other was finished at the stove? When they came to my father's funeral, Uncle Raymond drove his car, and Uncle Harold sat in the back. At the funeral, they sat in different rows, far apart. I spoke with each away from the other. Uncle Harold told anecdotes of my dad, how as boys he had saved up his money and paid his two younger siblings' way into the polo grounds for a Major League Baseball game. Uncle Raymond spoke only of sadness, his sadness, my sadness, the terrible sadness of losing someone we loved. Today, Uncle Harold is buried in the same grave as his mother, father, and other unmarried brother, Norman. I do not know where Uncle Raymond is buried. Uncle Harold beat him to that grave, and wherever he lies, I am sure it is resentfully. Thank you.
Okay, our next honorable mention winner, I'm going to say his name and say the name of his poem. I have to say that he's in the hospital right now, and that his wife told me that before he got in the ambulance, his one concern, this is a true poet, his one concern was that his contest entries had all been mailed. Not that he had signed a power of attorney, but that his contest entries had been mailed. And that's Gil Fajiani, and his poem is called Passing, and he comes from Long Island City, New York. So I just have to say his name because it just seems like the right thing to do. Can you imagine he's worrying about his contest entry? The next honorable mention winner is James D. Gwynne. He's here. No, I know he's here. I saw him. My father plays the trombone, Clifton, New Jersey. Let's welcome James Gwynne.
Okay.
Try not to trip you.
Thanks, Maria. I'm honored to be reading here. Also honored to be reading this poem about my father just a couple days after his birthday. My father passed over 58 years ago, so this is for you. My father plays the trombone. His musical ability came from his mother, who played piano in church. And he and his friends from the gospel youth group, Doug on trumpet, Christine on clarinet, Marvin, string bass, played spirited renditions of evangelical songs at tent meetings and Sunday barbecues for several summers after the older fellows returned to work and got back to rebuilding the world after the Second War. Some Saturdays, returning late after playing at a retreat, they'd cruise until they saw a parking lot full of cars, a little bebop or swing coursing through open windows at some creekside restaurant. And leaving Christine asleep in the car, they'd slip in and join the hurl, the fray, the bodies jumping to a beat from the corner jukebox. And during a lull, somebody might recognize one of them from other midnight sessions and ask for a song, so they'd bring in their horns and bass and get things going. At some point, a trill might come from the doorway, a tweet, tweet, a tweet, reet. Christine with the opening notes to Chattanooga Choo Choo, pushing the action into big band mode, the crowd immediately alternating on the singing parts. Pardon me, son. Yes, is that the Chattanooga Choo Choo? Track 29. Oh, you can give me a shine. On into the night. Many people in our area remembered those years before Korea and remembered those times for their children and grandchildren. And when the next generation came home from the next war into another unsettled peace, they looked back at those moments with a good deal of warmth, but some sadness too, recalling those who transitioned quickly into the next phase of the 50s and those who didn't. Christine hit head-on in her car, killed by a drunken driver. Marvin just gone somewhere no one knew where. Doug horribly burned in a fire in some backwater saloon, only freed to feel no pain when he grabbed a microphone and in some serene trance sang the gospel songs from his youth. Just a closer walk with thee, when the roll is called up yonder, amazing grace. My father, in later years, before he died, but still a young man, reaching for those moments he had lost, trying to pull back those times and friends with the sweet bell sound, pushing the slide down to capture the low notes, which during warm-ups he made into long, lonely goose honks that would bring out giggles from his kids. He got to beat in some interrupted rhythm, improvising a dirge for a lost skein, a past that could never continue, as distant and remote as a remembrance of the final flight of another trombonist, Glenn Miller, en route to a USO show during World War II, his plane over the English Channel lost in fog, who was another lonely flyer who soared out of history and into our memory.
Okay, M.J. Harris. Is MJ Harris here? Oh, great, okay. MJ Harris is also an honorable mention winner for her poem Humanity, and she comes from Upper Montclair, New Jersey. Let's welcome MJ Harris.
Thank you to the Poetry Center and Patterson Literary Review for this honor and for my first time being published. So James read for, thank you. James read for his late father. This is for my late grandfather. Humanity. My grandfather fished on both coasts, rode motorcycles, and cooked for United Airlines when flight was still luxury. He danced all the time and hit my grandmother. He made us laugh, wore white patent leather shoes, and drove us drunk through the streets of San Mateo. He was sorry, so let us braid his mustache. My grandfather worked hard and more, had some dreams of prosperity, owned a store in Roselle, abandoned it, and maybe his family, a beautiful wife who, if he left her, never recovered. He had 11 kids, gave them strong names like Thomas Jr., and iron rules like don't let nobody disrespect you. He populated a small house in Collinsville where Negroes were doing well relative to other Negroes. My grandfather always had quarters, gave me handfuls, never minded if I blew them all and asked for more. He always had cigarettes, a slurry-mouthed joke, and places he was welcome. He was a lotus to me. Still in photo, he reverberates, wearing a t-shirt that says "fuck you" and matching suspenders. Could I ever wear myself so openly? My good American, my grandpa, who reminded me I only have 2 cheeks, so be careful when I turn one. Thank you.
Our next winner is Josh Humphrey, and his poem is River Jumpers, and he's from Kearney, New Jersey. Let's welcome Josh Humphrey.
So I woke up one day and I had a stray memory of taking my uncle to prison, and I thought it must have just been wrong, but then I asked my other uncle about it, and he said no, he did go to prison on the weekends, which is a strange thing. So I wrote about that. River Jumpers. One of my uncles had to go to prison on the weekends for getting in some kind of fight. They called him a weekender. They called him a river jumper for a reason left unexplained. My father would pile us in the Ford to pick him up on Sunday evenings, and he would eat cereal right from the box with dirty hands, laughing because it was delicious, and it made him think of his mother's house. We loved my uncle, my brother, and me. He was always a step away from doing something big-hearted and bad, driving that truck he had that didn't have a windshield, insisting on taking every cop who stopped him out to lunch. He gave us our best secrets the time he let us sit with him on bar stools. We never asked why my father loved him. Maybe it was for the same reasons we did. Maybe it was because he understood about the weekend stretching sometimes like a sentence, reminding him that he was not a rich man, wearing those jeans with holes in the knees, lifting his legs for my mother to vacuum while he watched football, not too loud. He must have reminded him of that boy who always got him in trouble, the one who jumped into the shenango and the whole town thought he was dead. When the cops came to the door, it was him who opened it, a finger marking the page of a book, and hair still wet, and Coke bottle glasses missing. These river jumpers my father knew he couldn't be, but thought about being when he was the last one awake in the house, maybe the whole block, wearing those slippers that kept his feet so warm and breathless tight, those slippers that were probably for his birthday and that he probably hated as much as the nightshirts my mother would buy him, and the plates she collected that hung on the walls, shiny in the late-night TV light, like 100 eyes.
Let me ask you, isn't poetry wonderful? I really, it just makes me so happy. Okay, the next poet is Leah Johnston Robotham, The Old Photo, and she's from Montclair, New Jersey. Leah, are you here? Oh, good. Come along then, dear. Do the same thing I do, hang on to the edge.
Thank you, Marie. This is my first time up here, and I have to tell you, I am humbled to be here. So, in this old photo, you are so alive, I can smell your Chanel No. 5 and feel the warmth of your coat. There is an audaciousness about you, along with charm and courage. Your periwinkle blue beret is jauntily set on the right side of your red curls, held in place with your Irish dancing brooch. I still feel the sway of the subway as we go down and under the river to New York City, a sojourn, one of our weekly sojourns, where and when you took it upon yourself to expose your 3 nieces, or the 3 dearies as you referred to us, to the wonders that our parents had failed to educate us in. We knew Manhattan better than our neighborhood on Irish Hill. We looked at poor, we gazed at rich, we never took cabs. Your feet work very well, she would remind us, as long as you use them. We absorbed all of it, much more than we always understood. Not just the eggs Benedict at the Waldorf, but the smell of sauerkraut at Nedick's. We learned that standing room only still afforded us the mesmerizing vision of Peter Pan flying across the stage at Radio City Music Hall, and that nosebleed seats still held tight to the beauty of the humming song from Madame Butterfly. And yes, in this old photo, you are so alive, I can smell your Chanel No. 5 and feel the warmth of your coat. Thank you.
Our next poet is Adele Kenny, and her poem is The Way, and she's from Fanwood, New Jersey. Let's welcome Adele Kenny. I saw her before. I knew I saw you. Good to see you, sweetheart.
Thank you, Maria, and hi, everybody. My poem is a reflection on aging, which sadly, or maybe not sadly, is inevitable and comes to all of us. The way. Lately, they move in, their arms in our sleeves, hands in our gloves. Less of us, more of them. Their features on our changing faces. And it comes to us that they haven't let us go. It's the difference between gone and completely lost. They've always been there and come to us now like thoughts rethinking themselves. Touchable again, They become the mirrors we hold to our lips. Reflections of them look back at us through our eyes. We trace their heavy lids and wrinkled cheeks on the glass. We wear their spotted hands and marionette smiles. What we loved in them or didn't love enough, what we dread in ourselves. They come to remind us there's more time past than there is ahead, and we walk with them inside their shadows. Softly, we call our own names into the dark, something to be clear about, proof of nothing. They are where we began, father, mother, grandfather, aunt, his stooped shoulders, her stiff knees. Age brings them back to us in these signs of change and impermanence. We become what they were. Strangely reassuring, this is the way they call us home, the way we begin to go. Thank you.
And our next honorable mention poet is Stuart Leonard, Liberty Halves from Garwood, New Jersey. Is Stuart here? Yeah, I thought so. Thank you, honey. Congratulations, Stuart.
It's a bittersweet thing that we may come to know our parents best after they're gone. This is for my father, Herb Leonard, Liberty Halves. Shiva had ended. The house was empty for the first time in a week. Now the real mourning began, tears with no ritual to guide them. Mom wept at the kitchen table. In her hand, the 2 worn silver coins my father carried for over 60 years. Those Liberty Halves were a remnant of her husband of almost half a century. She clutched them as if they too would leave her. The heavy element, something tangible, an anchor that would bind his spirit to her, so she would not be alone. For my mother, their value was proximity. Rubbed smooth of any collectible status, the silver alone had some earthly worth. She wept over these tokens because they were always with him. But the coins held more of the man than scales could weigh. Depression-era baby, raised in hardship, his father laid off from the shirt factory, his mother as hard as the times. Austerity was not policy, just the way it was. Hunger was not a far-off place. It peeked through the windows. You knew it was watching. His older brother cast a long shadow. Straight-A student, covered in accolades, the vessel of possibility. My grandmother poured all her hopes and dreams into him, the chosen one, the eldest son, who would rise from the deprivation and justify that toil. My father was an afterthought, was not given a middle name. All the affection lavished on his brother left only harshness and criticism for him. He learned his role, became the clown, the cut-up, he who would never be his brother, who had no choice but to create himself. By 23, he owned Peter Pan Pharmacy, worked 10 hours a day. He left at dawn, filled prescriptions, did paperwork, inventory, changed light bulbs, hired and fired, locked up, made a last delivery, came home exhausted. Each day, a victory. Each day, He was his own boss. He took me to work 2 Saturdays a month. I hated going, yet did not mind being there. I would stock the shelves, sweep the floor, work the register, eat lunch with the delivery guys, heard my first dirty joke, and learned many things not taught at home or in school. One Saturday, we worked late. Just us two. I finished putting together the Sunday papers. He called me in the office, handed me my pay. I could tell how important it was to my father that I earned the money. The look on his face was worth more than the cash in my hand. He took 2 silver coins from his wallet, held them in his palm, thumbed an engraving, told me how when he was 9, he got his brother to set up a paper route since he was too young. But it was his route. He did all the work, grew it to over 100 customers. The coins that wept in my mother's hand were his first payment. 2 faded Lady Liberties, striding forward into the sun, bearing branches of oak and laurel. Glory to the day he pocketed those Liberty halves, got on his bike, rode to the next house, master of his own dreams. Thank you.
Okay, our next honorable mention winner is Elizabeth Marchetti. My sister doesn't write poems. Totowa, New Jersey. Elizabeth. I know the feeling.
My walking cane.
I know the feeling, darling.
Thank you, Maria. It's a pleasure to be here. I did bring the right poem. Good for me. I think I'm getting senile. My sister doesn't write poems. After Szymborska's poem in praise of my sister. My father didn't write poems. My mother didn't write poems. My father told great stories. My mother told great stories. Born in 1905 and 1906, those early 20th century tales could not have been written by me, although I have some stories of my own. Born in 1931, a true Depression baby. I tell my stories in poems written in free verse. I try to use all the devices one should use in free verse. Poetry is in the details, the metaphor, the simile, the perfect image, the epic line that goes on forever without any punctuation. I imagine I am a bird, a tree, a fish, a puppy, a cat meowing. My name is Sparrow, Oak, Goldie, Freckles, and Frida Kahlo, a kitten, not the artist. Our granddaughter, Sarah Ann, named her. This young woman, an artist, a teacher, has been known to write a poem, as has her cousin Beth Ann, although Beth Ann's art is photography. Once she said, "We come from a family of artists." My sister doesn't write poems. Her art, like mine, is conversation. We have long talks about our grandchildren, joke about how ancient we are now. When she says, "Old age is a bitch," I think of it as a very short poem. Thank you.
And our next honorable mention winner is Pat Mattola. and her poem is I Go Back, and she's from Cheshire, Connecticut. Let's welcome Pat Mattola. And Maria has to get her certificate.
Thank you. Thank you. This seems to be family night, and I have one about my grandfather. It's called I Go Back. I go back, grandfather, to New Haven Avenue, the 2 family houses you built with your hands, homes that would house your children's children. I wind my way around the old homestead, the crackled sidewalk lined with columbine, lily of the valley, sweet sense of youth. I climb the stairs to the yard's upper garden, to your pear tree laden with fruit, the fig tree you buried each winter like the words I love you held tight in your heart. You were gruff, a man who came to this country alone at 15, arrived through Ellis Island, carried only a suitcase filled with strength. I find the currant bush, pick small red berries, their tartness tasting sweet in my mouth. Grapevines entwine my childhood. I squeeze the bitter skin, suck sweet juice from grapes you used for making wine, the wine that fueled the love and arguments with your sons, my father, my uncles, a Friday night card game you played religiously. Bless this house hanging above you on the dining room wall, grandchildren watching TV in the next room, the women busied in the kitchen pretending not to hear the shouts of anger and laughter that fertilized memories that would grow, blossom into roses, azaleas, their clustered blooms tight as families who lived together next door, no weeds among us. Thanks.
I don't see Carol Stone, do I? No? Okay. Our next honorable mention poet is Muriel Harris Weinstein, Mama's Last Stand, Great Neck, New York. Muriel Harris Weinstein? No. Okay. Missing in action. Sharida Yoder, as usual, from North Haledon, New Jersey. Let's welcome Sharida Yoder.
I'm very grateful for this honor. And this poem is about how long love lasts. And it's called As Usual. You can't actually say goodbye or move on just because he died. His body lay on the floor, covered by the striped pink quilt, his hand stretched out. Even though they carried him out to be cremated, his shadow in our mind lies there on the rug, still at a slant, memory's relic. His ashes now rest on the piano. We cover them with books, and no one has shopped for an urn. We have no desire to tend them or to touch them in passing. His chair is empty where he would read and fall asleep, but we still see him sitting there, his newspaper and books beside him, talking back to the TV. His presence is indelible. Hearts are incised with those we loved. They can no more be erased than scars or stone. There is no absence. The cat disappeared, but his dishes and bowls still wait for him. We see the dead loved ones walking from room to room as usual, even though they now are silent and no longer breathe. Thank you.
Our next honorable mention poet, it deserves an extra big welcome, Donna L. Emerson. Her poem is called Shining Brown Hair, and she comes to us all the way from Petaluma, California. Congratulations, Donna.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's good to be home. Although Maria has taught us that we don't have to ask permission, I asked my daughter permission to read this poem today. She's here. It's called Shining Brown Hair. I cry today in the open as the pastor leaves our church. I'm crying for myself as my daughter prepares and does not prepare to leave home. Well into autumn, she refuses to write her college applications. Homework interferes, she says, as we pace and clench our jaws, regard calendar deadlines, and worry. Of course, we suffered this with her older brothers, not knowing then they were leaving for good. We didn't know then about the transformation. I don't want her to change. I want the girl who still reads her essays aloud, whose hair tumbles as we joke about boys and French. A man told me today his daughter never returned after she left for college. Now he uses a cane, shuffles, forgets a lot. He says again, she had shining brown hair. Thank you.
Our next honorable mention poet is Nancy Lubarsky, and her poem is Origin Story, and she's from Cranford, New Jersey. Is she here? Yep. Congratulations, Nancy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I was born at home. Not that my parents had a preference. My mother panicked when the contraction started. She forgot the plan in case my father wasn't home. She called him, but it was too late. My mother always bragged that my 2-year-old sister was her doula. She brought towels and water to clean up as I exited the birth canal. I tell people this story. Sometimes I make it funny. I add the part when my father spots the ambulance that he called and jumps out of his car thinking he can run home faster. Sometimes it's frightening when I focus on my mother's pain and the blood. Other times, my sister is the hero. She listens to my mother's cries and brings her just what she asked for.
And our last honorable mention reader for today is Kenneth Silvestri. Fate of My Maternal Side is the name of his poem, and he comes from Nyack, New York. Let's welcome Ken Silvestri. Congratulations.
Thank you, Maria, for all you do. Whenever I come into this building, I always think of my father. He was a police officer for 40 years. And when he was a young cop in the 30s, he wasn't allowed in this building. He later became head of the vice squad and came in and made several arrests in this building. And I'm very proud of him.
And another irony.
Another irony. The fate of my maternal side. It was not easy when growing up in a cold water, kerosene-heated apartment to recognize larger perspectives. There were, adjacent to my backyard, railroad tracks that hinted of faraway places. My mother had her scheduled ritual chores all done with resentment and imposed values of what she was taught, like knowing the right amount of starch to add to her ironing of clothes. She was always neatly dressed in a plaid blouse, creased blue jeans for her ribbon factory job near the river. Her father died in 1951, leaving a void that produced long cutoffs with her 3 sisters, creating gaps that put large memory holes in my cousins' lives. My father, from his oldest sibling role, reframed his gender by having always helped his mother do much of the household's second shift. He cooked polenta, made my school lunch, cleaned and sewed the buttons on my sweaters. By day, he was always a well-postured police officer and head of the family. This legacy really baked me. I cringe when I see a soiled dish in the sink or when my shirts are wrinkled. My godmother, Aunt Betty, had no children caused by a pre-modern medical knee-jerk mentality hysterectomy. She was 2 years younger than my mother. They had the same birthday, yet their temperaments could not be any more different. She and Uncle Jack, who my parents constantly reminded me was not an Italian, were so kind, took me out for Sunday dinners at the Robin Hood Inn. Later on, always slipping me a $5 bill to fill the gas tank of my 1958 Chevy Bel Air. I unexpectedly ran into them walking hand in hand at Ringwood Manor State Park. They were so glad to see me enjoying one of their favorite places. I got a 20 pushed into my pocket that day. Aunt Lee's husband, Uncle John, called me a few weeks later and said, "Your Uncle Jack died." "Did you hear me?" "Yes," I said, "he's gone." Uncle John died shortly after, as did Aunt Peggy's husband, Uncle Nicky, who had an infectiously honest smile. My childhood ended as I drove to those funerals. Aunt Betty lived into her 90s, missing Jack every day. My mother never realized how lucky she was to be the only daughter to have a husband for 70 years, continuously crying out my father's name in a nursing home after he died. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause to all the wonderful poets we've heard today.